Welcome back, everybody, to another great episode of People Talking from a Social Distance. Today I have another great guest, someone who I was very worried about trying to keep this school appropriate, but we'll do the best we possibly can. It's the always clever Jeff Bainbridge.
It's squeaky clean.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Luckily, they didn't hear what we were talking about before we recorded. I'm glad you're here today. I'm excited to get a chance to talk with you. Other opposite sides of the building, we don't necessarily get a chance to interact as much as I would like to, but someone who I always enjoy talking to. So thank you again for your time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I feel the same way. You can always blow me away with the amount of quotes that you can cite. Like I'm like, I'm gonna have to go look that up before I cite something. I gotta reference this, make sure it's right. Like I've got the general premise, but so it's always impressive to see how deep your catalog is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was talking to Luke Spicer on one of these, and we were talking about what drove or what sort of led us to our profession. And I was like, I wear it on my sleeve, right? I can't stop from quoting people and doing all that stuff. So first place I like to go when speaking to educators is just sort of talk about, we all know that our profession is really central to who we are as people, but if you were asked to sort of apply a label to yourself outside of teacher, what would that label be and why?
Yeah, I think even more importantly than teacher, my first label is father. So I've had two great kids, and parenting is akin to teaching. They're run parallel. So always striking that balance of how to build someone up in a safe way, but also allowing them to dry their wings and fly, allowing them to show you what they can do. Outside of school, that's my biggest concern is fulfilling that role. So, and that's one of the things that I always wanted to be. I knew growing up, I'm like, at some point I want children. I want to be a father. And so that helped drive me into teaching, because there's no other profession where I felt like I could fully fulfill the role of father. Because time off, like the schedule, like the amount of time I would have had to dedicate to something else. So the last decade of walking to the library for story time, biking to the public pool and stuff, has been a big part of my life.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's interesting. I always try to make the connection back of like the label people choose is often tied to their teaching. You're the first person to kind of flip that switch a little bit. The teaching helps to create the space for being the father, as opposed to the father as a result of the teaching. So that's right. That's really cool. I guess that this kind of goes into that, but maybe you're taking another direction. I've always found that teaching allows me to really embolden my passions. Like I love teaching the act itself, but I love that it offers me places to engage in things I'm really interested in. So can you give us an example of a way that your profession has helped you to shape, foster, embolden, or sort of enlighten some of your passions?
Yeah, so, kind of growing up and through my adolescence, I was always almost smart enough to realize how dumb I was. And so I kind of knew that I would need to be a lifelong learner. So kind of the first time I had heard that term, I was really appealed to me. And so I was like, okay, yeah, this is like, I always want to grow. There's always something. It's such a big world. And we have so much information now, and you can specialize in so many different things. How can I still kind of be like a Renaissance man, where I know enough about enough that you're around it, and so teaching has really has forced me to do that. So one, just when I chose Spanish, because I knew that would always force me to continue learning, because there's so much depth and history and to each different country. So there was just the amount of information, the ability to travel, and the limited amount of time and funds. Like I was always going to be able to go someplace new, experience something new. And then right? Our profession forces us to go back to school. We're some of the most educated people in the country, right? With the lowest level of compensation. Hopefully, right, the kind of trade-off is that our pension compensates for that, and that you are able to have a comfortable life, but maybe not a luxurious life, but a comfortable one. So right now I'm on my second master's, and I'm almost done with, this should be my last semester for a master's in kinesiology and curriculum. So one of the really exciting things that I've been learning about are these different models of instruction. So that really you can apply to any class. So I'm working with a professor, Wright, who is one of the foremost professors in the country who studies TP, teaching personal and social responsibility, TPSR. And so it's an instructional model. How do we teach that? So that often falls into really what's the role of a father or a mother, the parents, what should be taught at home. But that comes, you don't only teach English, right? So how can we prove that we're teaching that? A lot of sports programs claim that, hey, we teach kids how to be responsible, how to achieve, be motivated, how to be a team player. But do they? And can we prove that, right? Because there's a lot of coaches that get lost in the win at all costs, where it's because you get lost in competition. So that's one model. Sport education is a really interesting model. I'm working on a class. It's not a grad class, but it's adventure ed. So that kind of follows that as well. And then the adaptive PE. So one of the scariest things about physical education is that every physical educator becomes a special educator. PE is mandated for students with special needs. You have to be prepared. And currently, from what I've seen, Northern has an incredible program, but nationally we're not doing enough to prepare those teachers to really take care of those students. But one of the things from those studies is like the idea of universal design, where you have a class that any single student of any ability level could come into, because we get them in language class as well, right? You get students from all levels, and they need to be successful. So like, how can you design a class that is that differentiated? So, I mean, a lot of kudos to the physical educators in our building, right, who deal with that. And so I'm trying to take some of that and bring it back into the Spanish classroom. Like, how can I incorporate some more movement in my classroom, because that helps the brain, helps us learn. And then how can I design a classroom that's more universal? One of the adventure ed principles is challenge by choice. So it's like, hey, here's all the things you could do. What's appropriate for you today? Like, so that's how like that has embodied that passion to continue to learn. Because if we don't continue to grow economically. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, right on. I mean, you're singing my song there. I'm a big proponent of the standards-based and proficiency-based grading, the whole Rick Wormelli thing. You know, fair isn't always equal. Working on skills as opposed to working on curriculum. So all that stuff sounds awesome. Yeah, you got an advocate right here as well with all that stuff.
Yeah, which I took your recommendation and grabbed that book. So when I get done with this one and two others, we'll get to that.
All good. It's all good. That's awesome. That all sounds really amazing. And again, I'm stoked that I get to hear about it from you, because you can definitely tell your passion for it, just in the way you're speaking about it. So you brought up some books. We don't have to go down the educational wormhole with that, but I love the idea of recommendations. I mean, obviously, English teacher, I'm trying to throw books at people all the time. But I think a good way to get to know someone is through the things they recommend you should read or watch or listen to. So I'm always excited to hear what people say. I always have something to write down at this section of the podcast. But if you were to recommend a book or movie or an album or show that you think would help people just sort of understand the way you see the world, what would it be?
Yeah, this was a really tough one, because again, I've always wanted to be literate. And so like taking these classes was really, they like, you know, it forces me to read, which is good. And so, but for fun, one of the authors I found early on, and so these are all probably ones that you all know already. So it's Vonnegut. So he was the easiest read. I could just pick up a book and, you know, a week or two later I was done. So one of his books, two of his books that influenced me most were Player Piano and Dead-Eye Dick. So in Dead-Eye Dick, I think is really the main character in there is neutral. And so maybe a hidden fact about me is I have a very, very passionate person, a very high drive. I could not conceive of a character being neutral prior to reading this book. Like, I just didn't understand why someone would like not get married, not be in a relationship, it was completely foreign. So I've done some work at like my previous school. I was with the Gay Straight Alliance. So I worked with students there and kind of understanding that spectrum of human sexuality, that like we can fall anywhere in there. We're just like we're all somewhere on the spectrum of autism. Like we all fall somewhere on this, that I also love to cook, so like it's always come back to that recipe, right? We're made of the same ingredients, but we just have different quantities of each thing. So those two were influential, and then I love Primus. So one of my first shows, my second concert was 1995 in Davenport, Iowa. Like, it was a pretty small venue. It was super intense. Tales from the Punch Bowl had just come out, but there was a lot from Fizzle Fry and Sailing the Seas of G's. So those two are big influences. Because I think he does a really good job, Les Claypool, in his lyrics of looking at politics, individualism versus the community. Like, how do hence I am at home for legitimate medical reasons for my family, but like, how do you be an individual, do your own things despite what tradition might mandate? And then we need the community, but like, how do you still be a member of the community, but be yourself and thread that needle? And I think Player Piano does that well, and so do those episodes or those albums.
Fantastic. So obviously, hugest Vonnegut fan of all time. Like, every time I can force feed people to read Vonnegut, I do. Player Piano, his first novel, fantastic, and that dystopian future thing. And you're right, threads that needle of individuality so well. And then obviously, like, Dead-Eye Dick, I'm so excited you said that one, because there's so many people who I've told to read that, and they're like, well, I just didn't get it. Like, that's supposed to be his anti-gun book? It's like, no, it's his anti-everything book. Like, like, just divorce yourself from it all. So love both those books. Love all things Vonnegut. I am the hugest Vonnegut nerd in the world. And then, as you were talking about Primus, all that could go in the back of my head was to defy the laws of tradition over and over, right? It's the only place I could go. I love Primus as well. Before everything got shut down, I think that's the band I've probably seen the most, just because every time they're in town, I'm like, oh yeah, that's going to be a great show. That's going to be a great show.
Yeah.
So,
and I think they hit on that metal thing that you and Matt were talking about, where it really gets into social issues and political issues, like, you know, for the song American Life, right? And Jerry was a race car driver. Even those kind of get into what does it mean to be American? And so I enjoy that. I typically like NWA does that. Tribe Called Quest. There's a lot of those, some more aggressive music, Rage Against the Machine, that you know, it's not just about a broken heart or an excited heart, which like is 98% of music, right? So
For sure. I always, like, you brought up a specific band, so I'm always gonna ask, do you have a favorite Primus album? Is there one that you're like, that's the one I always go back to no matter what?
Probably Sailing the Seas of Cheese. Um, I love Tommy the Cat.
Yeah. Tom Waits, right? Tom Waits is great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So right now, I think for me, it'd be Green Naugahyde. That's the latest one. Just Jay Lane on drums, every song all the way through. And that was, I saw them like 3 times when they were on that tour. So,
oh, nice.
Including the 3D show where they did, where it was like the 3D visualizations while they were playing.
Really?
Really weird. And then I also saw them on the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory tour where they had like Oompa Loompas on stage the whole time, which was very interesting.
Did you travel for that, or was that around here?
The Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was in Aurora, I believe.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, I have traveled a little bit. I've gone around the Midwest to see them. I won't. I mean, there's a few bands I'll go all the way out to the coast for, but it would have to be a really good lineup.
Yeah.
Before COVID struck, my brother was supposed to go see them at Red Rocks, which would have been a fantastic show out in Colorado. That would have been.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. Yeah. I right now I'm listening to a lot of more like pop.
Okay.
Some stuff that's more upbeat and contrary to all the other white noise.
Yeah, fair enough. I had that happen the other day. I was going for a walk and I was like, I probably shouldn't listen to like Black Thought, like super politically motivated hip hop. Maybe just go a little lighter. Like, so I can do that. So we kind of hit on some stuff. You had already kind of mentioned this next thing that we like to talk about. Again, everyone has stuff that is kind of hidden or unexpected in terms of the things they love or the activities that they partake in. So do you have either a surprising fandom or an activity that we wouldn't guess unless you told us?
I don't know. I don't really think so. But I'm opposed to ties.
Okay.
I hate the necktie. So I guess it's not like a fandom.
Kind of an anti-fandom. You're against ties for them. That's fine. Is it just like a stuffiness thing, or is it just you're just like I just don't like it?
They're stuffy and they're dangerous. It's just you're just inviting someone to walk you around like a dog on a leash, like. So I just see nothing redeeming about them, even aesthetically or practically. So someone has to die usually for me to put a tie on. Or
it's a pretty high bar.
yeah, it is. It is. So
fair enough. That's a great answer. I never thought of it. Now I will never be able to see a tie as anything but a dog leash. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Woof.
You already touched a little bit about the idea of being a lifelong learner. And again, I'm right there with you in terms of that's one of the great benefits of this profession is we always are learning. We always are trying new things. We always are trying to push ourselves out of our comfort zones to be better at who we are and what we do. So is there another thing that you've learned recently that you would like to share with us?
I guess it would still kind of come back to everything that I've already said about the PE curriculum. But when I think about kind of that lifelong learning of us, every single lesson we're modifying, right? So like you're constantly tweaking multiple times a day. But one of the things I love about teaching and working with the students is it keeps me optimistic for the future. So when we look at a country divided, working with the students always makes me optimistic. Like that I'm like, okay, well, we might not crash into the sun. We might not go down in a fiery mess here. So that's a really rewarding part, and I think it's something that Tim always talks about. Is that they may not remember the content, but they'll always remember how you treated them. So that kind of engagement with the students is something that I learn and relearn every year, you know? So.
No, I think there's really something to that idea of, and I've talked with a bunch of colleagues about this, about that. Like, I could not imagine having to go and work with people my own age and above, like all day, all the time, right? Like seeing what the younger generation is looking at, how they're viewing the world, what they're seeing and what they're getting. I had laughed, one of my students was doing a project about generation differences. I was like, I'm millennial generation. We were already kind of screwed in terms of like buying houses and getting married. I was like, I cannot even imagine what Gen Z is going through at that, watching all this happen. Yeah. Wait a minute, I don't know about any of that stuff. So I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I love that idea of the learning happens on the fly. It's not always what you expect to learn. You know, I didn't think I would have as much knowledge of social media as I do at this point, but it's a way to interact with them and a way for the students to see me in a different light. So that's a great answer.
Well, and actually, to add on to that, I've learned a lot this past year from my colleagues, so who are younger. So, you just talked to Mitch. Jen Leon just started with us, and she's phenomenal. And Christina. So as I was graduating with my undergrad and my licensure, they were just kind of really starting to talk more and more about communicative language acquisition and the natural approach. And we've used that in my whole time here, but it's been a mixture of different methodologies of instructional methodologies. And so we completely scrapped everything this summer and have rebuilt the curriculum and our way of instruction. Not only are we teaching online, but we're working to teach in more of a natural approach. And those three have really led that push. And so that's been great to kind of step back and listen and learn from them. And so that's been a really cool personal growth for me this year. And it's actually, we all know that in the next 3 years, it's going to be a really great growth for our students as well as it evolves.
That's awesome. I love, again, a total fan of like long-term like plans and changing and looking at it from the larger universal worldview lens, as opposed to just, how do I get through this curriculum right now, or how do I get these students to learn this skill right now? That's great. And again, speaking my language, bad pun, sorry, about curriculum. That was not planned, everybody. That was not planned. But I guess this ties in really well to the last question I have for you. And again, before we get there, again, this has been a great talk. I always enjoy speaking with you. I hope our colleagues get something out of this, because I've learned a lot. So I think they will as well. But looking at the world around us and knowing there's quite a few things that we could probably answer this question with, but if you were given the opportunity to change one thing about the world, what would it be, and why would you do that?
I think globally, I would ban the use of all plastic, but and the combustion of fossil fuels. So with that, nationally, the one thing I think that would be really beautiful for our country would be if there were no more single issue voters on the issue of abortion. So I know it's controversial, right? And I'm a big fan of life. And it does happen early, but it lasts a long time. And I wish people would vote on all those other 99 years that we have. So that's what I would change about our country, is that people would look at a depth of issues and not just that one, because deciding on that one, I think, is detrimental to everyone else who is alive.
Just put it on the record. He was the one who went political both times. Just saying. Just no, I think that's it. No, you're totally fine. And I think there's something to that, you know, just that whole idea of the multitude of effects that are off of that one cause, the multitude of things that change in terms of society and the way we interact with each other. I'm with you. I'm a huge fan of life. I'm all for people getting a chance to live, but I also understand the complexity of the issue at hand. So,
right. And you know, Greg, like COVID, politics is in the air these days. So it's in the air. But yeah, if there weren't so many difficult decisions that you had to make about bringing a life into this world, if you knew there was universal health care, if you knew like some of these things were alleviated, yeah, like you said, it's like immigration, it's a multifaceted problem. It's a very complex problem, like all of it's all interrelated, right?
Okay. The problem I think we have is we're so used to slogans, right? If I can't put it on a poster board, I can't get behind it. So it's the same thing. So don't call it global warming, call it global climate change. That doesn't roll off the tongue as easily, but maybe people will see it real. Yeah. So I
like hot earth.
Yeah. Let's have summer all year round. Well, I just once again want to thank you for your time. This has been a blast. I'm hoping once some sort of normalcy returns, I won't have to be relegated to speaking to some of my favorite colleagues just through computer screens. And I look forward to getting a chance to have a conversation in person at some point in the future, hopefully after we're all in a bit better state. So thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, when we're all done with PTSD, it'll be great to be together.
Boom, get that pop.